Those are decisions that are democratically made within the organization.
Because it's connected to the people who actually have a stake in the organization.
That's right.
Meaning, and if you choose to take the risk, then you also choose to reap the reward.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the big problems, obviously, is that when we try to posit sort of
Wait, is he advocating for communism here? It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? Stop the train, everyone. We're getting off. And we're
what are sort of the big issues? You look at the Republican Party and you say
watching
To
TYT.
your point about
one of the things
localism
that
and
I'm
all of
seeing,
that,
it's what we
this
would
is a
call.
Oh my
little
God,
bit
all the
example
videos
of
are playing at once.
other side
Stop.
saying,
I
well,
can only
possible things, or you
take
take
so
them out of
many
context, they-
bench of Bebos at once, okay? Okay, everything's paused now, thank goodness. I hate that it auto plays. All right, so we got 4 chunks here. The full interview or whatever, I guess debate discussion is like 2.5 hours long or something. So there's no way we could ever watch it all. Ben Shapiro to Anna, why did you agree to come on my show? I feel like that is kind of interesting. It's like about platforming. Civil war inside the Republican Party, also kind of interesting. Money and politics, and how to empower labor in America. So these are 4 chunks. They're releasing them like periodically on TYT. And probably like the Daily Wire, but I guess, whatever. We're supporting TYT over the Daily Wire, obviously. TYT, I kind of like TYT helped kind of like radicalize me in a way. Like it was kind of like the CNN that I would watch when I was in university. I've definitely become like more left of them as an adult. Cenk Uygur is particularly kind of like annoying to me now. But I still think Anna Kasparian is really great. So shout out to Anna.
it's just really, really important in a functioning democracy to have Americans see one another as fellow Americans as opposed to
America.
an identity that needs to be super combative with a different identity. And I think that's what we've kind of turned into. You and I clearly have a lot of disagreements on policy, disagreements on culture, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're an awful person. It doesn't mean that I should be afraid of you. If anything, I should prove that I genuinely believe my political views by engaging in these debates. If I can defend what I believe with actual facts, statistics, empirical evidence, well, that only proves that there's good reason to believe in the policies that I'm promoting. And it's
Yeah, I definitely agree with Anna on this, like not that I'm like the best master debater or whatever, but so many people were so hard on me for just like talking to Karima. Also, thank you, Ansi for Squirrel, for sharing that.
easy to be in an echo chamber where everyone already agrees with you, but you're not really being challenged. So I like to be challenged. I like to put my political ideas to the test, and I think this is a good opportunity to do it.
Yeah, this is one of the things.
You don't think debating works? I feel like it does, though. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people in debate bro communities who will say, like, like I used to be like going down the alt-right pipeline, but then I saw your conversation with like this other person I used to like, and they kind of like snap out of it a bit when they hear good arguments.
Things that I really like about you as a person. We actually got to know each other when we did a debate about a year ago, I think,
Yeah.
over in Pennsylvania, and we were talking in the green room beforehand, and we got along as human beings. And one of the things that's nice about conversations like this is, again, what you say I think is super important, which is that the social fabric of the country is going to be built on the idea that people can have conversations like this, and yet it's considered so unusual and so crazy. Have you gotten any blowback for being willing to do conversations like this one?
I have. I will say, it is a small portion of a very loud group of self-identified leftists on Twitter, for instance. They'll get very upset. They'll accuse me of platforming you, even though, I don't know if they notice, you've got a bit of a platform on your own. I don't need to help you in building a platform.
It's the same everywhere. Even if I was wildly successful, I would be getting the same criticism as I am as like when I talk to Karima. It's crazy.
or platforming you. I think that there's this very real fear that in engaging in these conversations, you are legitimizing the other side. And my point is, as long as the other side's coming at me with good faith arguments, they genuinely believe what they're saying, having these debates is important in actually deciphering what
That's
you
right,
as the
Antifa.
viewer believe, right? Because if you're only listening to one side, if you're listening to leftist media, liberal media, and you don't get the other side at all, your policy ideas are never going to be challenged. You're not going to hear the other side. And I think it's led to this culture right now where Americans overwhelmingly seem to have difficulty with nuance, right? Everything needs to be black and white. And honestly, political issues are usually a lot more complex, a lot more nuanced, and nothing in life is black and white.
And that's what makes them interesting in the first.
Except that one Michael Jackson song. One thing that always gets, okay, like for example, if you were to take this to the extreme, let's say Bernie Sanders was allowed by the Democratic establishment to be the leader of the Democratic Party. Do you think that he would be platforming Donald Trump by debating him on Fox News? Right? Like, just like to take it to an absolute extreme example. Or would you want Bernie Sanders to debate Donald Trump? Or like, or would there be people who are like, how dare you platform a fascist? Right? I think if socialism, if the left is to be successful, eventually you'll have to be on the largest stage of the world. Right? And how do you say, hey, don't engage? It's kind of just like mind-boggling to me. Ben Shapiro is sure great at nuance. Yeah, Ben Shapiro known for his nuance.
First place.
Right.
If it was all that black and white or that easy, you wouldn't have to listen to shows like yours or shows like mine, and you wouldn't have to. I mean, I've always encouraged people to listen to shows that are on the other side of the aisle because otherwise they don't know what I'm saying that's fact and what I'm saying that's opinion. And so I think it's really important for people to hear conversations between people who really, really disagree. You used a phrase there that I think is really important, good faith. And this is one.
Jesus, just so you know, we're watching at regular speed, I think. Yeah, this is normal speed. It's like Ben Shapiro freaking speed, though.
That I've had to kind of think through myself because obviously there are conversations that are not worth having. You'll have people online who will say you should go talk to this person. You know this person happens to be, like dregs of the earth. And then you say, well, I don't really wish to talk to, and they say, well, you say you're willing to talk to pretty much anybody. So how do you draw that line? How do you draw the line between somebody who is worth talking to, somebody who's acting in good faith, and somebody who's not really acting in good faith?
Well, I think the interaction that you and I had both before and during that debate was really important to me in that it gave me a better idea and sense of who you are. One of the issues I've had in recent years is the characterizing or the caricatures that are drawn of the other side. And I think the left does it, the right does it. So just kind of like lumping you in with, let's say, Tucker Carlson, lumping you in with, I don't know, someone else that
There's like 10 people who like work for Ben Shapiro that you could definitely just lump him in with, like Jordan Peterson and whatever that other supremely transphobic fascist guy. Good faith is such a good way to dismiss people's arguments. What do you mean? What do you mean, Oi Poloi? Matt Walsh, yeah, that's that douche.
I certainly don't think is coming at these debates from a good faith perspective. They're looking for clicks. They're looking to build their public persona. There's a lot of that going on. You're a pretty respectful person when we're engaging in these debates. I don't really see you trying to draw caricatures of me as we're in the middle of these conversations. So to me, that's important. You can just tell there's like toxicity, and then there are people that you disagree with politically, but you can actually have a respectful conversation with them. And because I had that experience with you, I was comfortable again having this experience today in hashing out our differences, but also talking about where there might be some similarities, where we want the country to go, because this country's always had a variety of political ideas, political differences. But there was a time in America where people could engage in these debates, engage in these conversations, and leave feeling that mutual respect for one another, seeing each other as fellow Americans, as opposed to my enemy, the other side. We need to, crush them. We need to do that. I want to move away from that. And honestly, during the coronavirus pandemic, I've opened my mind up to some programming that I otherwise wouldn't have listened to. So, for instance, there's this show called The John and Ken Show. It airs in LA, but I think it's actually syndicated all over the country. And I like listening to it because there are a lot of perspectives in that show that I disagree with. But there have been moments where one of the hosts will say something that in the short term I might be offended by or angry about or whatever, but I have to do my due diligence. So I'll investigate it a little bit and think to myself, oh, well, actually, he had a point there. So I think the necessity for nuclear energy is a good example of that. Once I realized right now the technology for renewables isn't quite where we need it to be, where we can just give up fossil fuels and be okay. Well, a good clean energy solution to kind of close that gap, at least for now, would be nuclear. And
I feel like that is kind of a position for myself and a lot of lefties how they have gone forward on. Like I used to oppose nuclear energy as well, but I think there's a case to be made that that there's a place for nuclear within a just green transition. Just to catch up with chat here, saying someone is or isn't using good faith arguments is a good way to dismiss people. Yeah, and I mean that's kind of like why you can usually tell when someone is acting in bad faith, but it's never really a good argument to be like you're acting in bad faith because you know you can't. It's not something you can ever empirically prove. It's like, well, you're acting in bad faith. It's like, well, okay, prove it. Prove that my mouth is saying something different than my brain is saying. You know, it's like nobody can do that. So I'm not sure what you're responding to there. Conservatives and the left have never worked together well. We're diametrically opposed foes. True. I'm pretty sure she says she says reproductive rights are a black and white issue. Yeah, for sure. There are issues, I think, that when there's like fundamental human rights being violated, that is not up for really debate. And I hope that they actually don't engage in that debate because there's really no point debating someone who believes in like anti-abortion. Unless they say ahead of time they're gonna sandbag you. True, unless you show up with the receipts. And you know what? I would go as far even to say that it's okay to debate someone who you know is acting in bad faith and not even giving you the benefit of the doubt because that can make them also look stupid and make their positions even more stupid to people watching. So
and you say that, and a lot of people on the left have a negative reaction to it. But I think it's partly because they're not typically exposed to other perspectives. Everyone's kind of in their own ideological bubble. It's a huge problem, in my opinion, and that's why I want to have conversations.
I mean,
like
that's a
this one.
great example. So I've always used nuclear energy as actually the litmus test on people who take climate change seriously. There are people on both sides who don't, right? There are people on the right who will say that it doesn't exist, that there has been no global warming over the course of the last 100 years, or who say that there is no anthropogenic global warming. It's entirely the fault of the sun. And you know, my perspective has always been, I don't have the expertise to challenge the IPCC when they suggest that there will be a certain amount of climate change. Their sort of outlying, more extreme predictions are the ones that have sort of the least predictability, and they admit that. And so the question becomes, what do we do in order to prevent as much of this as possible while still maintaining a lifestyle that Westerners are used to and that we should aspire to for the rest of the world? And nuclear energy has always been a great way of doing that. And so that perspective has tended to draw fire from both sides. You have people who say, well, why are you even acknowledging that this sort of thing is, you sound like Greta Thunberg? And then you'll have people on the left saying, well, how he doesn't even believe.
Even the YouTube captioning can't keep up with this. Fucking Ben Shapiro talking so damn fast.
In global warming because he is advocating for nuclear energy. That sort of failure of nuance, I think, has really deleterious effects because it prevents us from accomplishing solutions that, if you and I can agree on a thing, it's a pretty good notion that that's a fairly commonsensical thing because we disagree on.
Well, I guess apparently not, Ribbert. Maybe Ben Shapiro is not a climate denier. In fact, he has a litmus test of his very own that he believes in nuclear energy, I guess. So you know what? I would say even just this one concession here of Ben Shapiro saying that he believes in climate change is a good reason for Anna to be talking to him, you know?
so many things. And if we
Right.
can agree on something like nuclear energy.
Right, right.
Or I think perhaps what we're actually seeing here is like conservatism has moved past climate denial because they're like, oh well, shit, maybe with all these climate disasters, it's going to be harder and harder to deny climate change.
Then really there's not that much to argue about.
And I mean,
Oi polloi, this discussion is useless. It just started.
nuclear energy does not emit the type of climate, emissions, climate-causing emissions that other fossil fuel, oil, natural gas, that definitely does have an impact. It contributes to the climate emergency. So anyone who is against nuclear energy, I think there are some points that are legitimate. So for instance, people are concerned about another Chernobyl. I totally understand that. But the technology has improved since then.
Or
Better
Fukushima.
safeguards.
Not run by the communist Russians. Yes.
Yeah. But look, these are
Communist
conversations
Russians, okay.
that should be had, and we should be fearless in having these conversations. I feel confident in my beliefs and my values, but I also really want to get into basically a culture that leaves ego aside and helps people feel comfortable acknowledging when, hey, maybe I didn't get something right.
Yes, debate bro culture, famous for leaving ego aside. Let's go.
Because there are certainly areas where turns out I didn't get something right. I used to be 100% against nuclear. I thought nuclear would be super dangerous. I totally bought into like the Chernobyl.
I do wish that we were able to like be wrong publicly, and that could just be something that's more accepted. Online, if you're wrong about anything, like the whole world will like jump on you and call you an idiot. It's not a very good feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
But once you start reading into it a little more, once you actually start thinking for yourself independently, independent of some ideological model that you're supposed to fit into perfectly, it really does open your horizons and it allows for you to learn. And that's what I want to do. I want to learn and I want to make sure that the information I'm getting to my audience is well thought out and accurate.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks.
Oh no, it's Cenk Uygur. Quick, go to the next video.
What are sort of the big issues? You look at the Republican Party and you say, these guys are just, they're out to lunch.
Well, okay, just putting policy aside for a second, it's more about what I'm noticing in terms of, I don't know if fracturing's the right word, but the Republican Party is in a little bit of a pickle, right? Because when it comes to, and tell me if I'm right about this, when you look at Republican voters, it appears that they're certainly attracted to the MAGA type candidates. So they'll do really well.
I am genuinely curious here because I feel like Ben Shapiro, being a Jewish person, and also, he's kind of like not the worst, but he's obviously not great. I feel like he does probably want a more sane Republican Party, So I am kind of curious what he's going to say here. They're suggesting to anyone opposing nuclear doesn't think for themselves. Interesting. Well, Ben Shapiro certainly is but I mean, I think the original kind of opposing of nuclear was a bit of a debacle on the left. Like it is kind of it can be part of a green transition. I think obviously you should think critically about it though.
In primaries. But then once you get to a general election and the battle is really about those independent voters, those candidates really do struggle. And I think that's what really transpired in the 2022 midterm elections, right? These Trump-endorsed candidates who are further to the right, in my opinion, lunatics. Like, they'll do really well, but then all of a sudden they kind of try to tone down their rhetoric to appeal to either moderate Republicans or independent voters in the general election. And it's not really working out for them. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because I think you, just based on what I know about you, based on the conversations we've had, you're just a traditional conservative in my mind, really, right? And so
the TradCon.
And I remember you having some analysis.
I love it. Like, you can tell that he's like about to like jizz his pants. Here he's like, he's like, absolutely I am. Like, he just loves that.
Post midterm elections, you hit the mark on the head, like, or the nail on the head. It was correct in that we need to stop promoting these like far right figures who aren't appealing to a broader electorate. What do you think the solution is going to be? Because I think your analysis is correct on that.
So, I mean, I think that so much of this is attitudinal, meaning candidacies very largely in the primaries have become
Attitudinal? Are you kidding? Is that a word? Is Ben Shapiro making up words? Attitudinal. It's a word. Wow. Relating to attitudes.
Attitudinal.
Okay.
become not about being far right politically. I mean, as you say, I'm a traditional conservative, which means it's hard to outflank me on the right. But when it comes to sort of the attitude that's taken
Wait, it's hard to outflank him? Wouldn't outflanking him being going further right?
by candidates, that's what's attractive. And that's driven largely by the polarization. I think that inside the Republican Party, there's been a move, which is sort of understandable based on how assaulted people feel by the media in particular, that the more people attack a particular person on the right, the more people on the right rush to that person's defense and say, this person is just the best thing since sliced bread.
He is hard to listen to. I know. I feel like you have to be kind of like a seasoned debater to properly even like pick up what he's saying and then respond to it well, right? Like I think a lot of his audience, like, they kind of might just like the sound of his voice and how quickly it goes.
And that is, I think people see that as beginning with Trump, and it really didn't. I mean,
That's the thing. I could slow down the speed, but then we would have to speed it back up for Anna, and it's just like, it's too much work. Good morning, Man Perfect.
I've been here the whole time, and I think that for a lot of Republicans, that really started mainly with McCain. The sort of move from, I can't believe these people, like John McCain is about as moderate a member of the Republican Party as it's possible to find, and yet suddenly he runs for president, and he's the worst person in the entire world. He's garbage. He's terrible. What's going on? And then the Republican Party responds by nominating the most milquetoast human being on planet Earth in 2012, Mitt Romney, who is as inoffensive as dishwater. I mean, he's just, he is just white bread. He's white bread with.
You know what? That's very anti-Semitic of you to say. You know, this man's here wearing a yarmulke, all right?
Margarine. I mean, and everybody on the left immediately went to, he's the most scary person. He's forcibly cutting the hair of gay kids in the 50s, and he's the person who straps a dog to the top of his car. And Joe Biden out there saying he's going to put y'all back in chains. Mitt Romney's going to put y'all back in chains. What in the? And so Republicans responded to that. Many conservatives did by like, why aren't we fighting this? We need to fight. Whoever is willing to punch somebody in the face is the person we're going to support. And so that's how you get Trump. And then Trump wins. And so because.
So wait, is he saying here it's Democrats' fault? It's Democrats' fault that we got Trump.
Trump wins, there's this sort of halo effect that has now accrued to people who are.
Yeah, this is like blaming the victim here.
Quote unquote punchers. Now, I do think that the solution to that for the Republican Party is to find people who are smarter punchers. I like the punching. I think the punching very often is necessary, right? That's why I like Governor DeSantis in Florida. I think he's intelligent.
Of course, Ben there's already been a concerted effort to rally around DeSantis
about how he throws punches. I mean, like him or hate him, the guy's much more strategic than Donald Trump. When
he also didn't take any of Trump's bait. I mean,
right? No, I mean he's a very strategic thinker. He's somebody who really tries to pick his fights. Right? If somebody tries to pick a fight with him, he is not always going to pick up the glove and just slap back. Trump's big thing was, you can't hit me without getting hit on any score ever, and that's not DeSantis. So I think that the idea that the Republican Party is not going to be combative in the future is wrong. It is going to be and it's okay to be combative, but you have to pick the right targets. By the way, the same thing is true on the left. I mean, I think that when you see Democratic candidates, very often there's an attraction to sort of the most wild-eyed, because it's like, wow, the right really hates this person. They must be really, really fantastic. I think you see some of this from the squad. But
like who? Like Bernie Sanders, that wild-eyed Bernie Sanders, who like everyone wanted to be president.
There are definitely counterpunchers in the Democratic Party who know how to punch and are much more strategic in how they go about that. That is, I think, the future of the Republican Party. That's at least the hope of the Republican Party. If not, what you're going to get is whoever says the wildest thing and draws the most fire is by necessity. What I've said to Republicans is you're essentially letting the left pick your candidates. You're letting the left target the person and then hit them. And the more they hit them, the more you're like, that guy's great. Love that guy. Say, well, maybe they're hitting him, yeah, because he's on the right, but maybe they're hitting him also because he's a bad candidate and because some of the stuff he's saying is crazy.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks.
Oh no, it's Cenk Uygur again. God damn it. Just comes in at the end to scare the crap out of us. All right, next segment here. This is the money in politics. So, I guess the whole thing is I guess what concerns me, right, is the competent fascist. I think Ben Shapiro to me is like scarier than Matt Walsh. The way kind of like Ron DeSantis is scarier than Trump, because they know what they're doing. Trump, and they're like, and in a way that is scarier than a bumbling idiot who's only obsessed with themselves or the culture war.
One of the things that I'm seeing, it's what we would call in the industry nut picking. You try to find people on the other side who say the wildest possible thing.
They will take away human rights. That's the fight that they want. Yeah, I guess, I mean, that seems like the fight that they want, right? Like, especially like Ron DeSantis. He's definitely not a moderate by any means, you know? Walsh attracts teenagers. Shapiro attracts adults. I guess that's why it's scary. I for the life of me, can't imagine being a teenager and looking at Matt Walsh and being like, yeah, that's the guy.
Things, or you take them out of context so they sound like they're saying the wildest possible things, and then you critique that in order to drive up ire. And I think all of us do this. I mean, we're all in the media, which means you very often are playing a 20, 30-second clip of somebody. It's not a long-form conversation like this one because they're just different formats, and we all get this. I think the audience also needs to understand that that's a thing that happens. What's more dangerous is when that, I think, carries over into the political sphere, where you have people in each political party who are now attempting to draw and actually incentivize the other party to get more extreme. The idea being, what if we make the other party so extreme that they are unpalatable to the majority of the American people? They elect us, we win, we get to do what we want. Now, that in the short term actually may get them some wins, right? I think this is...
Kudos to Anna for probably like actually listening to what he's saying. Jesus, without subtitles. He talks so damn fast.
One of the things that happened in the 2022 election, particularly in the Senate, you saw some Democrats who are actually supporting the most kind of out-of-the-box, crazy Republican candidates like Don Baldock in New Hampshire in the primaries in order to elevate him, thinking, okay, well, that means he's going to lose, which is exactly what happened. It's actually quite smart strategy in the short term, but what it also ends up doing is it ends up fringing out the moderates, meaning like everybody who is not on the fringe is now not represented in the election. And what you've ended up doing is incentivizing the kind of most angry part of one party. And in your own party,
they could vote for the Democrat, who is almost guaranteed to be a moderate,
making them the most angry that they could possibly be about the other party, as opposed to, what if we all just sort of pick our best candidates and then let them go at it in the ring?
I mean, I wish that that was the actual method and strategy, but you would actually have to have a campaign strategy that offers the voters something to vote on instead of something to vote against. And I think that this has actually been an incredibly dangerous strategy for the Democratic Party, because they might feel super confident that their candidates can beat someone who's on the extreme right, but there have been instances where that wasn't the case. I mean, certainly in 2016, the Democratic National Committee was really propping up Donald Trump under the assumption that there's no way Hillary Clinton would lose to Donald Trump. Well, here we are.
That was really dumb. Democratic National Committee.
I mean, Donald Trump won, clearly. So there's that part of it. I also think when you consider the campaign donations that ordinary people give to the Democratic Party, they were not under the assumption that their hard-earned money was going to go toward far-right candidates in order to, you know, give these Democratic candidates a leg up in their mind. I mean, again, it's very, very risky to do that. I don't think it's a smart strategy at all. For the Democrats, even in the short term, again, it's risky, okay? Sometimes they get it wrong. And if you don't give people something to vote for, meaning if you don't have policy proposals, actual solutions that are appealing to voters, are they going to show up just to vote against the person you've been fear-mongering about? I don't think it's smart at all. Aside from that, I think what you're saying is also correct in that the conversation increasingly becomes dominated by lunatics. And I don't think that's representative of most Americans. And there's also this problem of lumping in everyone together.
Well, the Democrats donated to the Democratic establishment or whatever, the DNC. And the DNC, because that they thought they could beat Donald Trump very easily, they propped up Donald Trump. And I think, I don't know if there's a direct money tie. That seemed to be what Anna was saying. She probably knows better than me. But yeah, essentially, they felt as though they could beat Donald Trump. And so they kind of like propped him up as the candidate, which obviously the DNC, you know, their political instincts are horrible.
in like this neat little box of ideology, right? So I think in the minds of a lot of people on the left, you are the exact same person as Tucker Carlson, right? And I think you're different. I think you're different from Matt Walsh. I think you're different from Candace Owens. You guys are all on the same network. I commend you for having differences of opinion on the same network. And I'm sure it can be uncomfortable at times, but there are nuances.
Call it out. Like, make it awkward, Anna. Come on. Make it really awkward that Candace Owens like supported Kanye when he was on his like anti-Semitism tip.
And differences, and I think it's important for people to be cognizant of that, because I don't want to be lumped in with someone on the far left, right? I have significantly different opinions from them on certain matters, and
What do you mean the far left, Anna? You are like the far left when it comes to like America.
I think it's important to know what those differences are and not let, again, the extreme ends of the spectrum represent the entire country.
So, you know, one of the things that you mentioned there is
there's nobody representing an extreme end of the left in the United States.
The idea that you have to run on something, not run against something. And obviously negative campaigning is the most effective form of campaigning, despite all of the happy talk about how when you campaign for things, people rally behind you. People who are policy wonks tend to do very poorly in elections. People who are attack dogs tend to do very well in elections because that lizard part of our brain that senses threat is really activated by a perception of threat on the other side.
Well,
talking about the lizard people?
Actually, can I interrupt you on that?
Sure.
Because I agree and disagree. So let's go back to 2016.
Yeah, I really don't think it's just a matter of like giving people hope versus being an attack dog. It's like you have to be genuine and give people hope. You can be like a Bernie Sanders, radicalize an entire generation and give people hope. And I mean, he wasn't even the presidential nominee, right? And it's not about what you do, but like how it's done, you know? And I think it's not as black and white as Ben is saying here.
Because with 2016 several years away, we can now really analyze it for what it was. Donald Trump's campaigning certainly had a significant negative component to it. Negative campaigning was part of what he did. But he also offered, or at least paid lip service to, something that Americans were concerned about, which was bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, really taking care of workers in our country, maybe reconsidering some of the foreign aid that the federal government shells out. That appealed to his base, so much so that even today they're so loyal to him, regardless of what he does. So he actually did give people something to vote for. Whereas all we got from the Democratic Party during that election was, ooh, Donald Trump's dangerous. Isn't he so dangerous? Oh my God, don't vote for him because if you do, you'd be racist, this, that. It was.
It's like Canadian, like Justin Trudeau, take notes here. Come on, like don't let Polyev just like use this exact playbook and grab for power.
Just nonstop scolding. If that is what your strategy is, I don't think that it's a winning strategy, sometimes in the short term, but certainly not in the long term.
So that does raise the question as to what you think the Democratic Party should run on.
Right.
So the Democratic Party has radically shifted its appeal over the course of the last 15 to 20 years. If you go back to 2004, it was John Edwards running on sort of the Two Americas platform, which sounds a lot like sort of the language that Bernie Sanders uses when he talks about the United States, right? A lot of what he talks about is this sort of class divisions in the United States. It's very much focused on economic redistributionism, focusing on the blue-collar worker. This is obviously the audience that he's attempting to drive out to the polls. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, if you look at it demographically, seems to have become the party largely of upscale white liberals who went to college and low-income minorities. And that's a very fragile coalition because the truth is that I'm not sure that those people have tons and tons in common. White upscale liberals tend to be very concerned with questions of equity far more than people who are actually low-income minorities, like by polling data. The sort of woke concerns that everybody on the right likes to pick on, that is
woke.
White upper-crust liberals who are pushing that. It's not minorities who are pushing that sort of stuff. I remember having this conversation with Van Jones, and he was totally agreeing with me. He's like, what are all these white upper-crust liberals doing talking about this sort of stuff? They should be talking about sort of the bread and butter issues. And so you have the white upper-crust liberals pushing that, plus a
white apple crust liberals.
Solid dose of kind of very social leftist policy ranging from...
I actually don't think he's completely wrong about this.
Abortion to transgenderism to same-sex marriage and those sorts of policies that are not the chief concern of low-income minorities. And it seems like the way that they're getting low-income minorities to sort of resonate to the message is with the threat assessment of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is racist. They don't like you. They hate you. Donald Trump's evil, and all the rest of that. It seems like they dodged the bullet in 2022, but that's a very fragile coalition.
Well, I see this.
There is a weird alliance, and it happens in like Canadian politics too, where there is, like Ben is saying, whatever, liberal elites, right? Who are basically the governing interest of the party, like the Democrats in the U.S. or like the Liberals and the NDP in Canada, right? Like we don't have to say that they're white upper crust people, but they are basically liberal elites, right? But at the same time, the people who are the main supporters of those parties, and like people, you know, even like myself, who is like, I would vote NDP perhaps out of like the lesser of two evils framework, you know, like because I believe in like justice or whatever, but with like the woke things. And then at the same time, there are those people like in the Conservative Party or the Republican Party, like Pierre Poilievre, who are tapped into this like working class narrative, and somehow they have like their finger on the pulse, and they can like speak to working class people in a way that like Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau cannot for some reason like tap into. So it's this weird alliance between like because he's lying, I know, right? But he still manages to do it. Like the like it's just like a shocking kind of alliance between the elites on the left, or I mean, they're not really leftists, but you know what I mean, elites and who is supposed to be representing the working class people, and then this kind of like corporate elite who is somehow tapped into the working class, lying but knows what to say. Yeah, like I just don't understand why the NDP or the Liberals, they don't know what to say.
This is a problem, honestly, on both sides, campaigning on both sides. I think that increasingly you have both parties completely captured by campaign donations from wealthy donors, corporate donations. I think that's been a problem. That has led to pro-corporate policy by both Democrats and, I mean, Republicans have always been in that camp. But now Democrats have been so captured with that money. And then the other thing is, Ben, it's a huge problem that we have members of Congress invested in individual stocks that they are legislating about or legislating on. Because, first of all, that there's an insider trading issue there, number one, conflict of interest. And also, they're going to want their stock portfolios to perform well. So are they going to pass the right legislation to protect the consumer, to protect the worker, to protect the average American, when they are literally invested in ensuring that those companies do real well, because they profit off of that as well. So that is a huge problem. And so what you have now is both sides, in my opinion, campaigning on a bunch of BS, okay? Not actually focusing on what would improve this country for Americans, what would improve this country for the voters. It's just nonstop distractions. I mean, look, this is what we're seeing right now with the investigations in the House, right? The first thing Republicans said was, we're going to do investigations into Hunter Biden. We're going to investigate this.
Oh, yeah.
Fine, do the investigations. I don't really care, right? I'm not some loyalist to the Bidens at all, by any means. But the culture war stuff, the investigations, it's really important for Americans to understand. None of this stuff, at the end of the day, is going to improve your life, okay? So all the distractions, we need to be privy to the fact that they're distractions. And we need to get back to actually hashing out what policies need to pass in order to make sure that Americans are thriving.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, I knew a Chen Guger was coming. Okay. I was like getting ready, like, please. He scares the shit out of me every time. I don't know. I think this is like a decent thing you could say to Ben Shapiro's audience. Like, bro, like nobody finding out whatever is on Hunter Biden's laptop is not going to help the material conditions of you as like an average American white boy, you know?
To your point about localism and all of that, this is a little bit of an example of what I'm seeing happen on the left that kind of
vocalism. I guess we're jumping around conversations here. This is like the fourth part, I guess the last part we're gonna watch for today because I gotta go soon. But this is the how to empower labor in America. But the culture war is all the right has because their policies are not good for working people. So they scare people with gender and Hunter Biden. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, unfortunately, the left is kind of like forced to engage on that because sometimes that's just like where the conversation is, and you have to engage. But yeah, you're right. That's all the right has is to talk about those things. So I think it's great for Anna to bring that up because she's not really, she's talking to Ben's audience and saying, hey, all that culture war stuff is not going to help you at the end of the day. And I'm thinking, trying to get into Anna's brain here, thinking like, what is the most pragmatic thing to like spend her energy on? And if she brings up trans rights, that is like a really divisive thing. You're probably not going to reach Ben Shapiro's like core audience on, but for the whole Hunter Biden thing, that is like, it's just like, yeah, who fucking cares?
Reinforces your point. You go to Scandinavian countries and they don't have a federal minimum wage. What they have is trade unions who negotiate wages based on their workers.
Right.
That's why I want worker power, right? That's why I want workers to be organized. I think it's a far better solution to have labor unions engage in those negotiations and those debates with the employers, as opposed to sitting around and waiting for this insanely corrupt federal government to keep their promises in raising the minimum wage. Minimum wage hasn't been raised.
Trade unions also provide the unemployment benefits, by the way, in Scandinavia.
They do. That's right.
They essentially do the job of what the federal government tries to do here.
One of the
Ben, what are you trying to say?
Major components or factors in wages stagnating beginning in the 1970s was the decline of labor union membership. So that was the decade when labor unions really started to kind of fall apart to the point where we are today. Now we're starting to see a little more labor militancy. Honestly, that's the only thing that's giving me a little bit of optimism and hope for the future, because I've kind of given up on thinking that the federal government is going to solve these issues that workers have been dealing with for decades now. But to your point, I do think that there are solutions that are outside of the federal government, and it's really about empowering ordinary people. But it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take organizing. It's going to take putting your cultural differences aside, because that's an issue that the left has as well, in my opinion, where they want everyone to be pure, everyone to be exactly in line with them ideologically, culturally. Americans are not like
They want everyone to be a Gryffindor, okay? No Slytherins allowed.
like that, though. There's a lot of diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. We have different lived experiences, different backgrounds. We need to meet people where they are and not assume that someone who might disagree with you on something is automatically a bad person or a rabid right-winger or whatever they want to, accuse the other of.
And by the way, when it comes to private sector unions, I'm actually not fundamentally on principle against private sector unions as long as there's freedom of negotiation and as long as people aren't getting kneecapped on the side of the road. Right? The idea of collective bargaining, that's been part of negotiations since the beginning of time. There's nothing wrong with a set of workers saying, we wish to come and negotiate for a higher wage. The employer just has to also be able to say no from time to time. Otherwise, start your own company.
Yeah.
This is why I remember when last time we talked, we were talking about the idea of, and Bernie was big on this, the idea of sort of collectivization of ownership of companies. And I said, that's called a stock agreement. That's fine. I mean, if you and your friends want to put together a company and you own the stock in the company and you decide the wages, that's just called the company. Like that's fine. And in fact, very often you have some of the biggest sort of collectively owned organizations. I think the biggest one in the world, I believe, is in Spain.
Yes.
I have a feeling he's taking this out of Bernie's framing and putting it into a more capitalist framing. I'm not sure though, because I'm not an economist.
Madrigal?
Yeah,
yes.
I think that's right. And they actually engage in hardcore capitalistic competition.
That's right.
And have had to cram down on their own workers' wage decreases when the market actually undercuts them, because ownership is still ownership.
But those are decisions that are democratically made within the organization.
Because it's connected to the people who actually have a stake in the organization.
That's right.
Meaning, and if you choose to take the risk, then you also choose to reap the reward.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the big problems, obviously, is that when we try to posit sort of
Wait, is he advocating for communism here, in a way?
labor versus management, what both sides are putting in there, there's an opinion by labor that labor is the sort of labor theory of value. Labor is the only thing that's valuable to the organization. And
I don't agree with that, but it is a huge, huge revenue. I mean, the revenue is created by the workers, and I think that part of the equation is completely left out of the discussion when you're in America.
Well, again, I mean, I think that part of the revenue is created by the workers. Some is created by the capital risk that was made by the person.
Sure.
Some of it's created by the corporate structure. And this is why, again, I'm not against collective bargaining in a free market system where you're saying, listen, and we do this on an individual level. I think one of the big problems that we've had in terms of collective bargaining is that because it used to be that labor was very striated, it was a lot easier to do collective bargaining because so many jobs now are sort of individualized. This isn't to speak to like fast food workers or something, but you're talking about, at our company, for example, or your company, for example,
Yeah,
you have very specialized jobs. And so the idea that you can collectively bargain for very specialized jobs with very specialized job descriptions, it's actually incredibly hard to do that with any level of actual rationale.
No, you're
I guess that's why they couldn't hire Steven Crowder over at the Daily Wire.
I mostly agree
That's not true, says Oi Polloi. Don't concede that point, Anna.
with you on that. So, for instance, look, we have a portion of TYT that is unionized. I'm not.
Oh, right. Wasn't there all that controversy about TYT being unionized and Chang Yuger saying, like, it's a trap?
Part of that union because of the specialized nature of the work I do.
Correct.
So these
you
are
couldn't unionize.
right. These are the
that's
graphics artists, the editors. They decided to do it. More power to them. It's worked out, and I'm glad that they did it, and they're happy about it, right? But when I think about labor unions, I'm mostly thinking about major companies like, let's say, Amazon, which, you're seeing more and more of these Amazon warehouses either attempt to unionize or in some cases they've been successful in unionizing. I think it makes sense in that area, especially when you're talking about a company that's so massive that the workers are just they become numbers, right?
So again, if people are willing to join a union and then go at the company that way, that's fine. My big problem is that I think the National Labor Relations Board is rigged completely on behalf. I'm sure you love the NLRB. I despise the NLRB more than
is fantastic.
The NLRB should be disbanded. It's a garbage organization. It's garbage.
I disagree with you on that wholeheartedly. Listen, the Starbucks stores that tried to unionize, and by the way, many of them, hundreds of them, have succeeded in their union elections, and they have unionized. I mean, the labor crushing strategies that we've seen from the executives at Starbucks have been pretty disgusting. People who have been fired just because they've brought up the topic of organizing the workplace, just all sorts of violations. If it weren't for Biden's relatively labor-friendly NLRB, they'd have no protections at all.
Well, I mean, your protection theory.
Ben here saying like, hey, I believe in this in theory, but not in practice is kind of sus.
Theoretically is in how good a job you do along with your fellow employees.
Well, I mean,
the
when
NLRB,
it comes...
I mean, I have, listen, the NLRB is the kind
Most of the ones in Seattle that did unionize have been closed by corporate. Right. And then, I mean, shouldn't there be, it's a bad example, but I mean, shouldn't there be then just like more regulation about those, like that is in its own form, just like union squashing, right?
Kind of place where I made a joke online at one point that if somebody tried to take editorial control of my show on the basis of unionization, I would fire them. And the NLRB...
They can't, though. I mean, that is a ridiculous thing for anyone to attempt to do.
Of course, the NLRB sent me a missive, and I had to get a lawyer to explain to them that, number one, it's a joke, and number two, because
Wait, they actually try to do that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This is Ben Domenech over at the Federalist.
I don't think they could take editorial control as a union. That's just I'm with Oi Polloi here. Prove it. Like, yeah, they could fight for their rights as workers. I don't think they could fight for editorial control over the company that Ben Shapiro and probably some other rich people own.
Yeah, it is. It's 100% a free speech issue. Number two, editorial control is not implicated by labor contracts. Labor contracts are about wages and hours,
Correct.
right, and working conditions. It's not.
That's why we don't believe what you're saying, though, Ben.
You get to unionize at the Daily Wire to decide that you don't like my editorial control. I'm the owner of the company. That's not how that
Right,
works.
right.
So I mean, the
Yeah, that's not how that
regulatory
works.
overreach there is really bad. This is not to deny that there are circumstances. You're a coal mine.
I thought Ben Shapiro's like, that's not how that works, but they tried to do it. It's like, okay. This is why the left has trouble debating the right, because the right will just hit you with tons of disinfo that you have to parse through. Yeah, when they do the gish galash, whatever, gish galash, you have to really just like pick like the one important thing and try to stick to it. You can't fight all of this, right?
Miner, and all the coal miners in town are being jobbed by the machinery. Of course you should unionize, right? Norma Ray. Okay, fine. But the idea that the federal government is supposed to cram down on Amazon, that it has to pay people a certain wage when there are other people who are willing to work for below that wage in the same exact town, like, how is that consensual?
So he's saying that it's not consensual if someone is willing to do your job for less money. This is a big simping for capitalism energy, simping for like exploiting workers, in a race to the bottom, kind of like who's willing to accept the lowest wage to do this job. It's like, whoa, it's like completely against the idea of like workers' rights.
It seems to need to exist on both sides when it comes to labor relations.
Yeah, look, the NLRB's main role is protecting workers who might deal with their employer raining terror on them if they are organizing the workplace. You know, the retaliatory strategies that we've seen from companies like Starbucks have been pretty gross. We need to.
I love it. Like he was like so close there to like understanding the importance of like unionization, and then he just went off and made it like a ridiculous claims, you know, like that unionization would even creep into being like a freedom of speech issue where they're trying to like thought control the Daily Wire and some sort of like liberal takeover of the Daily Wire. Like Daily Wire's under attack from unionization of its workers. That is just like absurd claim.
To allow people to have those conversations, to organize their workplace without fear of retaliation from their employer, right? So that's the main reason why I think the NLRB is important. Aside from that, I just think that there is...
All right, TYT doing some editing here.
There is an imbalance of power right now, and it's because of the fact that labor unions have been dismantled in this country. And workers need those collective bargaining rights in order to have a say, not just in what they're getting paid, but also their workplace conditions. I think the rail workers and what the Democratic-controlled Congress did to the rail workers was pretty gross. I don't know what you felt about that, but rail workers deserve to be able to take a day off, or more than just a day off if they're sick or if they have a family emergency, without being penalized by their employer. And the fact that, you know, during these labor negotiations, they couldn't even secure that. And you had the Biden administration literally put its thumb on this, not literally.
But Anna, have you considered that somebody else might be willing to do their job and get paid less and work while they're sick or while their children are dying? Have you considered that?
Really put its thumb on the scale to prevent them from striking, I disagree with entirely.
So, I mean, on principle, I'm not in favor of unions being able to bargain for more than they can get. When it comes to the...
What does that even mean? How could they possibly bargain for more than what they can get? What they get is they're going to try to get the best that they can. That's the whole point of doing a job, is like getting paid as much as you possibly can for the least amount of work that you have to do. Yeah, that literally means that they shouldn't bargain at all.
Internal turmoil in the Democratic Party, having problems with the labor unions that it seeks to appease. I admit that I enjoyed it. But
so basically when labor rights were under attack, it's not an issue of class for Ben Shapiro. It's an issue of, wow, this is just internal Democratic politics, and I'm going to like revel in it. Yeah, he thinks Dems care about unions. Yeah, exactly. When Biden was the one who like smashed this, AOC and the squad, they voted in favor of I don't know, passing something through. They were kind of like also engaging in a bit of sussy behavior, which also had its own strategic value and was up for debate. So like the idea that issues of unionization are purely just something that exists within the Democratic Party or amongst the left is just like pretty disingenuous, I think, from Ben. He went from almost being open to these ideas of unionization, even though he was talking about it like through like owning stock in a company, but or sorry, collective ownership. But then he went and flipped it, and then he's like saying like, wow, this is something that's your problem over there. It has nothing to do with what he represents.
I mean, but it shows you, but that's the thing, Ben, like it's really important to differentiate between the principled left, right? I'm not just saying leftist, the principled left, those who actually
Principled left, okay. I mean, it's not the worst thing to make a distinction about what kind of leftist you are.
actually want to empower labor, and then the Democrats who pay lip service to labor unions. And that is why you are seeing.
Okay, I do like that framing. That is good framing because I think a lot of people in Ben's audience probably just hate the Democratic Party, right? So this making a line between the principled left and the Democratic Party I think that's a good line to draw.
Working people start to realign their political ideology, unfortunately, in some cases, with the right, because they will hear someone like Trump pay lip service to workers, even though talk is cheap. He didn't actually follow through with a lot of what he said. But just acknowledging those issues that workers have been dealing with made Trump super appealing.
Thanks for watching.
Oh my God, fuck. Cenk Uygur, I knew it was coming too. I'm like, get ready. And then he's still just like, all right, Cenk Uygur. I forgot what Anna even said there because freaking Cenk Uygur popped out like a demon trying to scare the bejeebus out of me. You can't avoid the jank? Yeah, I know. So Anna probably had a good point there at the end. I forgot what it was because I was scared by the presence of jank. So anyways, I felt like actually that last segment about labor in America was actually pretty good. There's only like Ben Shapiro, he was like made a small concession there for a moment, and then he like wiggled back into his echo chamber and like just like said so many things that like Anna, how do you respond to all of that kind of like BS that he was spewing? But I think what I did kind of like take away with that, I kind of like am reminded that in building solidarity, like you can, I think, reach right wingers, like the working class people who I feel like that is the line of attack that we need to focus on because it transcends the left and the right dichotomy, and like unionization is something that is like good for all workers, right? And at the end of the day, that just might be one of the only few issues that we can really like reach people who are otherwise kind of like our political oppositions. That's one of the few issues that we might be able to like reach folks on.